Hey, it's Alex Williams with the News Stack here at the Cloud Foundry Summit, and going to spend 20-30 minutes talking with Daniel Hekman of Grape Up. Hey, Daniel, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Great. Great. Daniel lives in Krakow.
I do.
And travels here twice a month to the States.
Yes, correct.
That means business is good.
Yeah, it's picking up quite nicely.
Why?
I think because Grape Up is a special combination of a IT solution provider that understands what large enterprises are going through when they go cloud native. But having started 13, 14 years ago as an IT company that builds products for Silicon Valley startups, I think we're very suitable in bridging that gap between everything that makes you an enterprise but having to move at speed like a startup does.
So you're finding that more companies are trying to build at that speed that a young company can move at when they don't actually have any existing infrastructure, they don't have any legacy technology. How do you, I'm very skeptical.
In your role, you should be.
But, these companies are like very large, entities, and they have all kinds of monoliths inside their enterprise, right? How rapid is this acceleration?
The market has proven that it goes a lot slower than they would like.
Yeah.
A lot of companies that also that are here, like Comcast, and that they communicate about what they've been going through. It's a journey of several years to really pick up the pace and to accelerate. And it's not necessarily the technology that is blocking that,
right.
It's people's behavior.
Right.
So it is about incepting a new way of working, getting people that are comfortable with change, introduce that to them, and then once they start understanding it and start working, it spreads like an oil stain through the company. But it really takes time. Implementing this company-wide never works. Many have tried, but 80% fails.
So your customers are larger organizations. They're also startups, though, are they?
No, we just focus on the larger enterprise organizations.
To help them move at a pace that you might see with a startup.
Exactly.
So how has cloud native technology started to change things? How has it been? How has it been perceptible to you that are these changes happening, and with cloud native technologies gaining more acceptance?
With concepts like microservices and containers, for those kind of companies that in their markets that are being disrupted, like insurance and so on, those concepts help them change their products much quicker than they could in the past. So when a new startup enters the market and then they have some new radical approach or a very interesting concept, they have to adopt, right? They have to change their product and meet this new demand. Or if they want to differentiate themselves, they need to have something in the market very fast. So in the past, when they had an idea and it took them 9 months to come to the market, which up to recently was still fast, it's too late. Right, they need to be able to go from idea to production in a few weeks with an MVP, and it is, I would say nowadays, not doable without concepts like microservices and containers that allow you to move at that speed.
So now at the Cloud Foundry Summit, they have a government sector, they have a government track here, and and organizations are starting to become more adept. They're becoming more DevOps oriented. Is the same? Are you seeing the same pace of innovation or the same pace of change in government as you're seeing in the private sector?
What I like about what's happening in the government sector is that the government acknowledges that these technologies also serve them in being a better service provider to the populace. Because at the end of the day, I think that's their job, right? To provide safety, security, and so on and so on. So I think it's a very good thing that they also start adopting these technologies. I think what the government's challenge is creating that feedback loop. I mean, as a commercial organization, I push a product to the market and I need to get feedback fast, and then I have a new iteration, and that process keeps going. The challenge for the government is creating a feedback fabric regarding their services. I think that is something that they probably still have to challenge, but I think it's awesome that they start leveraging those technologies, and once they solve that feedback loop, I think that will be even more beneficial for our society as a whole.
So when you think about feedback loops, I think in development practices, I think about DevOps and the practices that you're building to create those efficiencies with the resources that you have available. So you then have the space to be able to build application architectures that can be transforming. Yeah. How do you take people through that process in the government sector?
That is not an easy task, but it is not very much unlike in the private sector, right? We've got to convince stakeholders within the government or within commercial entities that the new normal is having your stakeholders which you provide or you sell your service to be part of the product management. At the end, you're doing it for them. So they have to be part of that process of how you build a product. And again, it's the human factor, right? It's not about the technology. The technology, especially in the cloud native realm, is all out there. But it's about convincing those internal stakeholders that it's not about you and it's not your product. It's the ecosystems or the market or the country's product.
So you did work with a government agency in the Middle East. We really can't name the country, but take us to kind of what their problem was. What was happening with this agency? This agency out of the Middle East. What were they? What were the monoliths that they had, and what were they trying to accomplish?
So this specific government agency is responsible for a lot of the public information regarding if you want to have a permit for building a house or all those kinds of services. Right. Are provided through that government agency. And the Middle East being an environment that grows rapidly, a lot of economic development and a lot of expats moving in and a lot of capital flowing in. There's of course a lot more demand in those services that are necessary to set up your business or to run your business or to, like I said, and to set up a house. So they needed to move much faster. And for them, after some research, they came to the conclusion that having an underlying fabric like Cloud Foundry would be a very good choice to let them move faster. But to be able to leverage that, they would also need to re-architect some of their old .NET applications into microservices. So we helped them architect that new solution and together with them in Dojo format. So our developers pairing with their developers, building those new microservices and completely re-architecting that and having that new portal that allows people to submit for a permit, for example, and having feedback on that within a few days, for example, instead of before within a few weeks. So
this agency had built their platform on .NET?
Yes.
Okay, and so they built it on .NET. And what were the obstacles that they were facing with this approach that they were using with .NET?
Well, that specific portal or set of applications being monolith applications, of course, doesn't make it easy to change something. Right. And when you want to change something, you have to take it offline and things like that. Well, that is, of course, nowadays not acceptable. Right. If you want to be a decent service provider, you have to move at speed because, especially in that region, there are many other governments that would also love to have your business. So you got to move fast. Yeah. And you got to deliver a high level of quality.
So, what were some of those monoliths? Can you give us an example of some of those monoliths that you were looking at when you first started the project?
Can you be more specific?
Well, I mean, what was the architectures that they had the .NET for? They were using .NET technology, right? They're probably hosting it on their own, their own data center. They probably still do, right?
Yeah.
They were taking a long time to re-architect these to re-architect the platforms themselves. What were those platforms that they were re-architecting? What was it? These systems of record for licensing and such? Is that what we're talking about here?
So to be honest, me being responsible for our business development efforts, I was not directly involved in the specific technicals, but what was apparent is that they really needed our help to decide what kind of cloud native architecture allows them to move at the speed that we are offering.
So what did they just? So what did you recommend and to them initially?
So, because they are a .NET shop, we had this discussion about, so should we re-architect it in Java or not? So we had, for example, a conversation about SteelToe. Right? SteelToe is a very interesting framework that you can leverage everything that we've learned with.
Tell us about SteelToe, because I think this is going to be a story we hear about more.
Yeah, I think it really enables the whole .NET ecosystem within Cloud Native to also leverage the best of microservices and containers and so on, and to not having to move all the way over to the Java world. So, and in combination with Azure and so on, really makes it a compelling tool to use.
So maybe you could just help us just briefly sum up what SteelToe is. What does it do? What is its function? What is its role?
So again, as a non-technical guy, I think the benefit of that framework is that you are able to use those microservices and those other tools that I just explained. And my personal technical knowledge doesn't really go further than that. So you put me nicely on the spot.
Oh well, I'm also not a technologist, and so we were both in that same camp right now. So with this approach, though, how do you guys think about helping companies and organizations like this agency think about DevOps? Because that's a critical aspect of what they're trying to accomplish, is building out a culture that really does kind of embrace kind of like incremental updates and such.
So we've done several projects last year where big companies in the manufacturing industry had asked us, how do we start doing DevOps? And we've said it's just about starting to do that, right? You need a platform. You need to leverage cloud native principles and concepts like microservices and containers and continuous integration and delivery. Choose a set of people that like change, and together with them, you start building a small practice. Lift and shift some applications to that platform, learn from that, and then start building new applications, migrate others, and then that inception point, it creates a lot of development space. Other developers, other parts of the organization see the benefit of them pushing code to production every day, and they say, hey, I also want that. And then slowly you see the benefit of implementing and you start developing your own DevOps practice. There are so many organizations that had a lot of operators for their platforms, and with things like Cloud Foundry, that decreases, and that resource that comes available, you can focus that on other things that also create value. So
how this concept of cloud native technologies affected your own business and how you're addressing the market? I'm curious on how kind of the relative popularity of cloud native technologies are helping, a solutions, product technology company like yours.
So, Grape Up as a company, we have an agnostic approach to technology, and there's so many tools out there to choose from, right? And there are some of very interesting tools. Concourse, for example, is an awesome tool to use. so we try and use best in practices tools that are available in the market, and it also forces us to every time learn, because sometimes we'll enter into a IT environment of a customer where there are tools that we did not touch before, but we will try and see how if the customer wants to keep using that, how that bundles within the whole stack. So every time we enter in a new project, we also learn, and that knowledge compiles and makes us more capable in next time choosing an even more suitable stack of tools to work with.
So are you guys starting to adopt more cloud native practices yourself?
Yeah, and it doesn't stop. And now with things like a serverless, like how do we adopt that and how do we combine that with a Cloud Foundry or Kubernetes or so? Yeah, we also learn.
Right. Yeah. So, for you going forward, what are some of those technologies that you're going to be, focusing on? I mean, I know you guys work with the Cloud Foundry community. I know you're also working with the Kubernetes community to some respect. Where does that go from here? And like, how about serverless technologies as how they fit into that spectrum?
So we perceive that through the enterprise spectacles, let's say. So I think the challenge that we're now facing, something that SUSE with their application platform has already set out on, is how do we marry the two, right? So that a company can run any production workload anywhere. By leveraging those two platform approaches. Serverless in the enterprise is the next step. But not just that, I also see another approach with companies like Mendix and OutSystems that provide those low-code, no-code platforms. I mean, that's even another step and I see all of them having a place within the enterprise. It's a bit difficult to predict what will be bigger or what will be faster, but you probably don't want to have every application, or you shouldn't want to have every application as a serverless application or as a stateless application. It really depends on the business case.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of the new business cases you're starting to see emerge then?
We see a lot of orientation towards data enablement. Companies wanting to get the most out of their data. So how do I leverage data analytics tools, or how do I build applications that give me more insight into data? I mean, at the end of the day, everything will eventually be abstracted away. So all you have left is data. And so how do I get the best insights from that? So that is definitely something that we see growing, and by bundling cloud native technologies the right way, there's a lot of space to really start working with your data.
So you're starting to find that the data layer really is what is the foundation.
Yes,
we're seeing the emergence of a lot of new database technologies. Redis Labs has been around for a little bit, but we also see these new graph databases emerge. Are they becoming more popular?
Yeah, with a colleague of mine yesterday, we were talking about that there's a customer that is keen on investing in that. How could a graph database really help lift that application to the next level? So there's definitely topics.
It's the raw data that that they need more granular looks at.
Yes.
Are you starting to see any interest in continuous delivery technologies such as Spinnaker at all, or other CD technologies out there so they can do that continuous development?
We see a lot of interest, especially within the whole Cloud Foundry ecosystem, to have this end-to-end automation of the pipeline.
Right.
So, yeah, we see that a lot, and those are different technologies, not only just Spinnaker, but also other ones. So, once you go down that path of DevOps enablement, and you want to have the capability to use microservices and integrate your code and then deliver your code continuously. And there are several companies here that have done an awesome job in automating their complete pipeline. So it's an awesome development.
And those are government agencies as well that are considering that.
Not just that.
Yeah. Well, this interesting kind of story about the track for government here. I mean, it's clear that they have different requirements, they have different needs, but in the end, it's, if you look at the private sector or the public sector, it's really organizations and the people behind them that are trying to transform.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, in the end it's not very different, right? Somebody wants to provide a product or a service and needs to be in communication with their customer in order to improve that.
Right.
So it's the same mechanism.
Right. And is the direction coming from the top down? Where is it coming from? I mean, we often hear stories about, why the board of directors is so important for, transformation, such as what we're talking about here, where, we often hear about digital transformation as a subject matter that the board of directors can understand and relate to. But when it comes into the rest of the organization, especially the software teams, it's about DevOps.
What I see is this hamburger appearing, and what I mean, let me explain. I think there's a convergence there's a push from up. From down to up and from up to down, right? We're seeing development teams asking up from, hey, I also want to leverage those technologies. I also want to move faster. There are things I want to do, and I need those tools for that. And simultaneously, there are management teams convincing their organization that if we want to be competitive, we have to start adopting other practices to move at speed. So I think it's awesome that you see a push from both directions.
Right. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us. It's been really great having you here on our show, and we look forward to seeing you at future events.
It was a pleasure, and next time I'll make sure to have a good answer when you ask me about steel toe.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.